Survey your teams, whether it's your on-site teams, your back office support teams, or your clients, your internal stakeholders. Where's the friction? Where do they have issues? Because if you're rolling out something that doesn't solve a friction point for the folks that you're rolling it out to, you will have turnover in the field and in your back office support services. So what I've done, and companies I've worked for that I've seen have success, is to survey the field and the back office support teams in a way where they get to grade how we're doing as a company. Where are we doing well? How is maintenance doing? How's the marketing team doing? Every single back office support group is just that to the field. They should be helping them lease apartments, do work orders, collect the rent that pays everybody's salaries. So asking them what's important to them and what areas are we performing is the most important part. Once you collect that information, you have to really distill down that feedback, because sometimes that feedback is going to have some bias in it. So you want to make sure when you're reading through the feedback that you're really culling what's important, what's a real friction point, remove some emotion, and get a list of things together that you can then prioritize. Go back to the field and say, we prioritized the list, we've looked at it, the senior leadership teams have evaluated it, but we want to make sure that these are the priorities before we move forward with the plan. From there, they get to pick. And then the company, if you guys have, typically you would put together a task force, okay? So then you take the list of things, friction points that you've got, prioritize your top 5 or 8 solvable friction points, and then at my previous firm, we picked the last Tuesday of every month, where the executive team would come together with a property manager, maintenance supervisors, support on whatever we were pitching. If it was marketing, we had marketing leads. If it was maintenance, there was maintenance leads. So you get the right group together and you interview 3 or 4 best-in-class providers that solve that friction point. Because we as operators don't have the resources to be innovating internally, so we're having to go outside to find these things. But once you put those items on a calendar for the year, then what you can do for your industry partners is let them know, we're looking at these 5 priorities this year. And let's say you're an IoT provider and I'm looking at IoT and I've got it scheduled for the 3rd Tuesday of every month. I'm going to go pull a list or show up at OpTech or at this conference or something similar. I'm going to go find the best-in-class IoT providers and I'm going to ask them to come and present at this meeting. And then from there, you've got control over what you're bringing in to your company. And you're communicating to the vendor community what your priorities are. And if you're not looking for something that they're providing, you can then communicate to them. We're not looking for that right now. Really helps control the flow. And then your field also knows. So as vendors are reaching out, talking to your regional managers, maybe they're coming through a client, could be coming through any different avenue or all avenues. The whole company, your clients, the field, everyone knows what your priorities are that year. So it's easy for folks to say no or not right now and communicate back to the community what your plans are. Anyhow, so this is a real simple innovation workflow, and I'm sorry the font's pretty small, but I'll walk through it with you. So once you create your calendar, you have to formulate a really detailed RFP before you reach out to the vendor community. You have to really dig into what are those friction points and what are you looking for. Are you on RealPage? Are you on Yardi? enterprise system does their solution need to integrate with? It's just simple pieces, but oftentimes when you tell people to come in, you might have a couple groups come in where they haven't set up their relationships with the enterprise systems yet. And that's a no-go for you right out of the bat. So it just is really important that you create a nice, detailed RFP and then reach out to the groups that you're looking for. You bring in the written RFPs before you meet with them for the presentation so you can have a really formal scoring process. It's incredibly helpful for everybody. Then you're not wasting everyone's time. And you also need to have good timing on when you plan to pilot. So you can communicate back to your vendor what your plans are. And then, yes, you're gonna move forward with one of your solutions, or no. And give them great feedback on why. Because everyone wants to be better, stronger, faster. So it's super important to be communicative on what your criteria was and where they either fell short or their competition just outperformed. So that's also an important piece. Then setting up your pilots. It's important that you pick properties where people have the skills to run a pilot, where they have the infrastructure to run a pilot. We were just talking a little while ago about water sensors. So the properties that need water sensors might not have Wi-Fi or connectivity to read the water sensors. So we were talking about an 800 unit community over some vast acreage. And they were struggling with, how do we get a Wi-Fi bubble over this place so that we can read the sensors to help us get that information? So oftentimes, before you even start the RFP, you need to solve for technology to support the technology that you're wanting to implement to reduce the friction that you've got in the field. So make sure you do the appropriate research. Let's say self-guided tours. You don't have the appropriate access system, or maybe you have the right access system up to a point, but you can't get the lock to work. You can get them all the way in the building, but you can't get the lock to work with the phone. So then you've got to fix that. So it's really important before you start the process to do a deep dive into what tech do you need to have the tech that you want. Next, okay, so pilot the sites where you can actually have the pilots and where you've got a team that is passionate about the solution that you're trying to implement. If someone is passionate and on your survey was even angry that something wasn't working for them, they're your best pilot because they are your squeaky wheel. That's where you're gonna get the most energy. They're your innovation catalyst for that solution. So I highly recommend the folks that complain the most, have them be part of the solution. They've got the energy and the passion around it. Once you set up the pilot, the other piece that is absolutely critical on implementing technology, anything new that someone has to incorporate into their day-to-day routine, you have to work with your training department. And if you don't have a training department, you have to lean on your vendor to help you provide that training, and not just once. You've got to be able to go back in and measure. Do they get it? Are they actually using the tool? Is it working? And is this pilot a solution, a true solution to the friction that we're trying to solve for? Anyway, then it's about evaluation and measurement. So you go back and you ask, are we doing what we said we were going to do? And is it working? We rolled out an enterprise system at a company that I worked for the wrong way. We were trying to solve for friction. We didn't hire a consultant. And we created a tremendous amount of work for ourselves. So one of the things that I will just let you know is measure twice, cut once. Make sure that what you're rolling out solves the problem that you're trying to solve for, because there are unintended consequences to every single thing you change in your organization. The other piece that's really important is if you're trying to change something that is systematically integrated in every single thing that you do, let's say payroll system, it will take you a very long time, once you pilot it, to teach everyone in the organization a new routine. So you just have to be patient, and I highly recommend you dedicate more resources than you think you need to each and every implementation that you roll out. The other thing is, once you evaluate to see if you need to dedicate more resources to something, and if you're gonna roll it out across your entire platform, now you need video and training and extreme attention to the rollout. Because if it doesn't get introduced to the teams appropriately, it's gonna fall flat. Or they'll do it for a month and then they'll stop doing it. Or they'll do a workaround. It's really, really important that you put the necessary time into the first parts of this process in order for it to stick. Let's see, what else? Oh, the other thing. Sometimes you're gonna find that a rollout is taking more time than you thought it was gonna take. So you might need to push your calendar down. What we've done before in the past is we've stopped rollouts because the teams are still digesting what we've rolled out, and then we've pushed it down further into the month. Let me see if I can get us back on schedule. Another thing that I think is, and I'm gonna end here and then I'm gonna ask some questions, or let you guys ask questions. But I have an email that I've got set up that I thought would be really important to share. It's really important to respond to people. It's hard when you're constantly being inundated with, hey, I want to meet with you, you're going to be at this conference, can we get together? You know, when can I get on your calendar? My solution's better than every other solution. But just responding and then trying to capture on the back end the information that each one of those industry partners is trying to share with you is also really important. So we've got an email that we send out in response, not all the time, but we're trying. It's something we recently rolled out. And then we've got an intake form that you can click on, and then it goes into a form and asks questions about what the solution is, so that as we're interviewing the teams, if we find a friction point that we don't have relationships for, we can go back to this database and sort it and look for the solutions that we now have identified as a friction point. So it's just a great way to make sure we're collecting all the information that's out there about the solutions that are out there that we might not be interested in solving for yet. I know that was really quick and super simple, but does anybody have any questions? Sure.
So you didn't talk about the end user, the tenant or whatever.
Yes.
Hold on just a second.
Yep.
Because there's the management and organizational aspects of things. How do you organize things? How do you make the management system work?
Mm-hmm.
What is the interface between those two items?
The management systems and the end user?
Yes.
Yes.
And it seemed like there was not enough, or the way you addressed it is you were examining what was working, what wasn't working. Was the end user a part of that?
So,
Only the organization?
no, you can do the same process for your resident. So it's exactly the same. You talk to your residents, you ask them what they need, and then make sure that you understood them before you roll out changes. The other thing about residents, and the same as with employees, but residents even more so, they're not the same person. You can't create one persona and then identify a solution for one. There's dozens of personas in your building, and they all have different friction points. So when you're trying to design solutions for residents, It gets very complicated if you do it correctly. You have to really dig into the survey results and understand the different personality types. And I would say we do what we call a BRAP survey. So we survey our residents and we see where their friction points are, and then we try and create solutions for our residents. But we actually hire a third party to help us because of the different personalities that we're dealing with. We don't have the resources in-house to try and figure out how to solve for all of the resident solutions. So I would agree with you. That's much more complicated, but one of the things that we've found is if you make your associates' lives easier so that they enjoy being at work, that translates directly to the resident experience.